Okay, let's jump right into this. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a historical event that is, frankly, as fascinating as it is complex. We're looking at the tragedy of Karbala, but specifically, we're zooming in on the drastically different ways scholars and historians view the responsibility of the Umayyad Caliph Yazid. It's a topic that has literally shaped history, and the sources we're diving into today offer some incredibly diverse and conflicting viewpoints on who is truly to blame. To keep things completely objective, we're going to look at this through several different lenses. We'll start with the tragedy at Karbala itself, then explore the viewpoint of the direct tyrant, the argument for complicity through negligence, the political defense, the stance of neutrality, and finally, the legacy of division. Let's get into it. Section 1. The tragedy at Karbala, a clash of allegiance. Let's just start by establishing the universally agreed upon facts here. The situation back in 61 AH escalated incredibly fast. It kicks off with Yazid demanding political allegiance from Imam Hussain, who, remember, is the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, and doing so under the threat of death. So, seeking to avoid bloodshed in Medina, Hussain heads toward Kufa after getting thousands of letters of support. But he doesn't make it. He's intercepted in the desert of Karbala by a massive army commanded by Ubaydullah bin Ziyad. They're cut off from water for days, and on the 10th of Muharram, the day known as Ashura, it culminates in the brutal massacre of Imam Hussain, his family, and his small band of loyal companions. The sequence of events is clear, right? But that brings us to the ultimate question, the one that's divided scholars for centuries, and really the core of our explainer today. Was Yazid the direct architect of this bloodshed? Did he actually give the order? Section 2. Viewpoint. The direct tyrant, a symbol of oppression. Our first perspective is probably the most prevailing historical narrative. This view absolutely sees Yazid as a direct tyrant. The sources outline his ruthless political strategy, describing him as a symbol of corruption and even as a wine drinker who openly flouted Islamic boundaries. They argue he set the stage for a massacre by purposely deploying incredibly aggressive governors like Ubaydullah bin Ziyad to crush any dissent. And what's really striking here is the indictment from his own family. According to one source, Yazid's own son Muawiyah II explicitly denounced his father when taking the throne. He called him an oppressor and famously refused to sit on a throne stained with the blood of Hussein. The sources also point to some horrific post-battle behavior as proof of his malice. There's this chilling account of Nu'man bin Bashir, a revered companion of the Prophet, rebuking Yazid. When the head of Imam Hussain was brought to the court, Yazid reportedly mocked the deceased by striking his lips with a cane, which prompted this outraged response you're seeing. And you can imagine the immediate aftermath. There was fierce resistance from the surviving family. Bibi Zainab, Imam Hussein's sister, stood captive right there in Yazid's court and delivered a brilliantly defiant speech. She completely refused to acknowledge him as a legitimate ruler, holding him entirely and personally accountable for the slaughter. Section 3. Viewpoint. Complicity through negligence, the nuance of historical proof. Now let's look at a more strictly legalistic argument from our sources. According to historical analysis from scholars like Mufti Tariq Masood, if you search the archives, there is actually no authentic, verified narration proving Yazid explicitly commanded the execution. This argument suggests the actual killing happened because the governor of Kufa, Ubaydullah bin Ziyad, totally exceeded his authority just to ensure the imam's capture. But here's the so what of that argument, the stark contrast between the missing order and the missing punishment. Even if he didn't order the hit, he never punished the perpetrators. And to many, that serves as a massive counter-argument to his innocence. Instead of punishing Ziyad for the massacre of the Prophet's grandson, Yazid actually rewarded him. Yeah, the sources note Yazid gave Ziyad additional governorships. Now, it's true he eventually treated the surviving captives with respect and gave them gifts and safe passage back to Medina, but historians often see this not as genuine mercy, but as a highly calculated political move to distance himself from the explosive public outcry that was spreading like wildfire across the empire. Section 4. The political defense, state security versus rebellion. This brings us to a strictly political, state-centric perspective that supporters of the Umayyad state used at the time. From this cold, administrative standpoint, Yazid was the established ruler with the power of the state. So Imam Hussein's refusal to pledge allegiance was legally framed as baghawat, or rebellion. They argued that extreme state actions were absolutely necessary to maintain the unity of the Ummah. Preventing a parallel government and a civil war was prioritized above all else, even over respecting the Prophet's direct lineage.
It's fascinating and honestly highly controversial that these strictly political defenses are still around today. Our sources highlight a modern instance of a Saudi preacher calling Yazid an excellent person for maintaining the state. Now, the speaker in our source materials strongly rejects this, but it just goes to show how stripping this event of its religious gravity remains incredibly polarizing today.
Section 5. The stance of neutrality, leaving judgment to God. When looking at the theological response, we see a wide spectrum. On one side, you have condemnation and cursing, known as lanatullah. On the other, praise and prayers for mercy, or rahmatullah. But the neutral approach, championed by prominent mainstream scholars like Mufti Taqi Usmani, suggests a path of silence. The idea is that since the absolute truth of Yazid's heart is known only to God, believers should just withhold judgment entirely. This quote really hits the nail on the head for the neutral stance. The argument is that Muslims need to prioritize their own spiritual duties, the 5 pillars of Islam, rather than trying to definitively solve a historical dispute from over a millennium ago. The ultimate judgment, they argue, belongs to Allah alone. Section 6. A legacy of division. The echoes of Karbala. So, how did these wildly different interpretations shape the Islamic world forever? Well, the event immediately sparked a scramble to assign blame. Was it tyranny? Was it negligence? Was it state security? And those opposing views didn't just stay in the past. They literally solidified into the deep-rooted theological and political fractures regarding justice and authority that still exist in the Muslim world today. As we've seen, the sources give us all 3 perspectives. Was it a calculated murder by a tyrant, a governor's tragic overreach, or a brutal state crackdown? It proves that history is like a giant puzzle, rarely just black and white, but a deeply complex web of motivations and beliefs. Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. When we look back at the tragedy of Karbala and dissect the culpability of a ruler from so long ago, are we just reading history? Or does the way we judge Yazid today actually reveal what we truly value when it comes to power, justice, and the morality of leadership? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the history you read.